Coming up on this week's show, the big retro gaming announcements from E3.
One of the best multiplayer arcades is back.
And we go deep into the demo scene with Haujobb.
The Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each week with our amazing friends at Bitmap Books. Now, very soon, we need to tell you more about Metal Slug: The Ultimate History, the first officially licensed book to document the history of one of gaming's most beloved franchises. Find out all about that and lots more on their website at bitmapbooks.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 280, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to this week's show, where we take you back to the golden age of video games. It could be those endless summer holidays when you hopped on your BMX, went to your friend's house to play some California games on his Commodore 64, maybe had a sleepover and rented the latest SNES game from Blockbuster, or those Saturdays when you went to the seaside and played on all of those amazing arcade machines back in the day. We reminisce about all of that, and of course, we bring you up to date on the latest happenings in the world of retro gaming and technology as well. And I think it is important to say, we don't just cover gaming on this show. I mean, it is a big part of it, but obviously back then, there was a lot more that kind of surrounded the games that we played. I mean, obviously there was magazines, there was, the early days of the internet that we've covered on this show as well, but also things like the demo scene. Now, I do appreciate that a lot of our audience, are console gamers, including Joe, who's our resident console expert. Ravi, how would you describe the demo scene to Joe?
Well, I think culture's the right thing there. And the demo scene it's basically like creativity and the coding for like art's sake and for design's sake. So you're not making a kind of aim in the end of it to make a game. You're making something that's going to blow people's minds, look amazingly impressive, or have some really cool music. And there's like different aspects to it. So you'll have somebody doing the artwork. You'll have a team basically. Somebody doing the coding that other coders will look at and go, wow. But what we're talking about today is we're talking about the demo scene actually being recognized by UNESCO as part of culture and important culture for Finland and Germany. And this is pretty amazing because this is a scene that started with a load of kids and sat in a big hall with their computers. Back in the days before the internet, they were bringing their monitors, they were bringing their setups, they were all sitting in a hall, they were all drinking, they were all kind of going mad and sharing games and videos and just like doing stuff for the passion, really.
Yeah, and I think that point that you made there about the fact that it's now been recognised as, World Heritage, which is a massive deal. Because I remember, I think, you and I, Ravi, we were back in the, the glory days of the demo scene. You're probably like me, just kind of read about it because, when I was like, 12, 13, I couldn't exactly jump on a plane and travel over to Germany to go to a demo party on my own. We were just a bit too young for that kind of golden age of it. But I do remember reading about it because I remember getting a magazine free with my Amiga 500 Plus. It was an issue of Amiga Format magazine that came in the box with it, and opening that up and actually seeing these kind of graphical demos, and some of them were like music discs where they'd kind of sampled, songs that were in the charts and put these cool graphics with them as well, and being really intrigued by it and thinking, wow, those look amazing. And then, back in the day, you'd have to order them from a public domain library or dial up a bulletin board.
Or you get Cracktros. So if Joe got handed a dodgy disc or a cartridge at the beginning, you'd pretty much see a demo then, a mini demo, which was a Cracktro, which was a kind of roots of the scene, really. And this week we're going to be talking to two amazing demo creators, and we're going to be talking to one that's involved in the art of coding as well, which is part of this initiative, which has managed to get demos recognised alongside huge cultural things like Stonehenge, where you get heritage and preservation, and they also organise the Evoke demo party. So we're going to be talking to No Name of Haujobb and Melkor.
Yeah, now these guys are really interesting. They actually live in Germany, But obviously, like you said, Ravi, they do events all over the place and have got a long history in the demo scene. So they're going to be on the show in around 25 minutes from now. Now, lots of news stories to get into this week. I mean, all the media has been going crazy about the announcements at E3 that, of course, was back on this year virtually, while everyone else is talking about, PlayStation's big announcements for the PS5 and, the new Halo game and everything. We focus a bit more on the retro kind of stuff. That's more our vibe, even though I've got to say, Breath of the Wild 2 does look incredible.
I was literally about to say, I don't know anything that's been announced other than the retro stuff.
New Monkey Ball for the Switch.
I did see the new Monkey Ball, and I did see there's a new Metroid, which is actually in, the classic 2D kind of 2.5D style. But I didn't know there was a new Halo. Did not know that at all. And I knew Breath of the Wild 2 was coming, but I didn't know it had been announced properly.
Well, the big one that everyone's talking about in terms of retro announcements from Nintendo's event that they did is obviously Zelda turned 35 this year. And a lot of people back in February when it celebrated its The Legend of Zelda's birthday, Nintendo actually going to do anything to celebrate, such a big milestone. But it turns out they're actually going to be releasing another anniversary Game & Watch, this time featuring 3 classic Legend of Zelda games. Now, this looks pretty cool.
Yeah, so we're going to be getting this Game & Watch on November 12th, apparently. So
just in time for your Christmas money?
Just in time for your Christmas shopping and your Christmas gifts. But yeah, we're going to be getting the original Legend of Zelda on there. We're going to be getting The Adventures of Link on there, and then we're also going to be getting the Game Boy game Link's Awakening, as well as a remake of Vermin, which was just one of the original Game & Watch games, which I think is like a juggling game.
Is that like a bonus game they're putting on then?
Yeah, they're just putting it on as a bonus game, but that would have been like the actual game that you would have got on a Game & Watch, back in the 80s. But yeah, this looks really cool. For me, this has got more appeal than the Mario Bros. One that they did last year. I know that was pretty cool and a lot of people hacked it and, they got it to do a lot of cool things. But for me, I think you're getting more bang for your buck here. You're getting 3 classic Zelda games, on this tiny little Game & Watch, which, I know we've been able to do stuff like that, get it on your phones and stuff for years. But for me, that's like blowing my mind that you can play like Link's Awakening and, the original Zelda on here. I'm not too fussed about Zelda 2 on this little Game & Watch. But I think everybody's kind of worried that they're not going to make loads of them.
Yeah,
because that's classic Nintendo. Only make a couple of them and, chuck them out and then they're, kind of scarce. But to be fair, I think people were worried about that with the Mario Bros. One, and that's pretty easy to get a hold of. Pops up quite a lot in secondhand shops, game shops and stuff like that.
A new scene, essentially, this little Game & Watch collecting scene, because I've seen people really into it. And also the hacking side, as you mentioned, is quite developed now. So
I imagine in November, kind of third week of November, one of our stories will be about how it's been hacked.
Oh, it got hacked ages ago, Joe. They're using a thing called RetroGo.
No, I mean the Zelda one.
Oh, yeah, it might be based on the same hardware.
Yeah, probably
so
based on
probably is,
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably just they've flashed it with the new stuff and changed it to look green a bit. But,
yeah, true.
There's a thing called RetroGo, which is a emulator collector that they're using, collection, and you can run some ROMs on that, and you use this FTM32 programmer, and maybe a bit of soldering required as well. But I've seen some mad stuff being run on the Game & Watches, so it's pretty cool seeing this like little scene emerge. Who would have thought it? A new scene for a really old handheld.
A new scene for a handheld that's going to be playing a game from 35 years ago. It's just crazy. But it's interesting that they're kind of missing the mark by like 6 months, the anniversary by like 6-7 months. And it's kind of like what we said last week about the Sonic anniversary. Yeah. With Sega, they've kind of missed it by like they're missing it as well by like a year or something crazy. So
Sega and Nintendo still warring. Who can be furthest away from the anniversary?
Who can be furthest away from the anniversary? But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It looks really cool. And like I say, you're getting 4 games on this one, which is pretty awesome. So I'm not too sure what the price will be, but I'm sure we'll find out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and these things, I think, a lot of people are saying, well, it'd be nice if they just, put this out on the Switch instead as a download kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, there's a good chance they might do something like that, I imagine, or maybe they already have. I haven't been keeping up with the Zelda scene on the Switch, if I'm honest. But I think there is something about these. I mean, like you said, Joe, it is probably going to be made in, maybe not, scarcity kind of numbers, but it's not going to have, they're not going to be making millions of these.
They're not going to be pushing like 80 million of them like the Switch. No. Do you know what I mean? They're probably going to make a couple 100,000 or like 1 million worldwide. Probably.
Yeah, these like collector's items, really, aren't they? They're for the hardcore fans.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was about to say when you said, oh, they might put them online. I think they are already on the Switch. At least, I think the first one is at least. But yeah, they are. They're a collector's item. They're there to kind of have fun with, play with a little bit, and then keep the box nice and tidy. Do you know what I mean? They are. They're collector's items. They're for the old school fans like us.
Yeah, and to be honest, they've probably got a factory now just churning out Game & Watches, and they're like, what should we do next? Green for Zelda, and
I
red
imagine
for
we'll
Mario,
get a Donkey Kong one next year, so brown one,
a Kirby or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know who's going to buy them? People that will just keep them in the packaging and never open them and put them on the shelf.
I'm going to buy 2, keep one sealed and play the other one.
Quick shout out to my friend Dubious Engineering. He's actually 3D printing nice little cases, like slip cases for the Game & Watches, so you can protect your screen and keep them in good nick.
See, that is quite cool, actually, because, I mean, I was looking at this form factor, and even the Switch, I mean, it's, obviously in handheld mode. It is still a portable system, but there are occasions when it does feel a little bit bulky. You know, if you're maybe just going on a car journey and he's sitting in the back seat, not driving, obviously. But it is nice to have something kind of Game & Watch size, isn't it?
He's driving down the motorway while he's playing his Switch.
Why has he gone over that field? But something you can just put in your pocket. I think that kind of form factor is quite nice. I think so. I haven't got any of these in my collection yet, but if they were affordable, I think for the right games, I definitely would. Now, something I've seen this week that I do desperately want in my collection, and this is a re-release. Actually, this is one of these arcade 1-up machines of one of my all-time favourite multiplayer games. Now, in the intro today, I was talking about those Saturdays when he went to the seaside. And I remember, early 90s, me, my mum and dad and my brother, we'd always go to like places like Scarborough, Whitby, and the first thing I would always make a beeline for in the arcade was The Simpsons.
You even did it when you were with me. We were at the National Video Game
I was about to say, you
like,
beeline for them at bloody Player Expo.
Just one of the best multiplayer games ever. And the fact you can have 4 players on it. I mean, we had a family of 4, so I'd even drag my mum on to be Marge, obviously, playing with a Hoover. It was a different time. But, I mean, it was, even though a lot of kind of licensed games turned out to be very poor back in the day, it was a really high quality arcade game. And now you can play it at home with the Simpsons classic video game cabinet from Arcade 1-Up.
Yeah, this looks absolutely awesome. So this is going up for pre-order on July 15th, so about a month away.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap, no. It's going up for pre-order at $600. Which I believe is about $200-300 more than the usual arcade 1-up machines. However, they're usually 3/4 scales, the arcade 1-ups, whereas this one they've just said is slightly smaller than the normal arcade machine. So I'm not too sure how big it's going to be, but it looks pretty big from the pictures. But it's going to be coming with the riser, which are usually you got to buy separate, but it's going to be coming with a matching Simpsons riser, so it makes it nice and tall for you. And also, which I love what they have done, is it is going to be the 4-player cabinet. It comes with the big 4-player joystick on the front.
You've got to do that, haven't you?
It's got to be. It's Simpsons Arcade. It's got to be 4-player. I think they've released a couple in the past where you could buy the 2-player one or the 4-player one of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cabinet. But this is the 4-player one. And also what's really interesting is they haven't announced what it's going to be, but there is going to be another game on there. Because most of the time when Arcade 1-Up do these, they release like 3 or 4 games on there. So it'll be based on like, it's the Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet, but it's actually got Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3 and Ultimate on it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, there is going to be another Simpsons game on this, but there wasn't any other arcade Simpsons games. So,
there's obviously Bart versus the Space Mutants are home games and
Bart's Nightmare. And, Bart versus the World and stuff like that, but they're not the best games. That the Simpsons Arcade was always kind of renowned as being the best Simpsons game, at least the best classic Simpsons game. So I'm interested to see what that'll be when it does get announced. I imagine we'll probably find out on the 15th of July. But it's cool because this is actually probably the only legit way of playing the Simpsons Arcade game now, because they took it off the Xbox Marketplace about 10 years ago, didn't they, or something?
Yeah, I bought it on there when it first came out. Probably about 2007, I think it came on there. The early days of Xbox Arcade. I think it was one of the first games I ever bought on there, obviously, because I love the game. But yeah, and this does look like as well, I mean, it's got the, obviously the arcade cabinet is an imitation of the original.
Yeah.
And it was always an arcade that just stood out. You know, when you went to an arcade and you saw this, obviously because it had that kind of, that bright blue colour and it had the Simpsons characters all around it. But because it was such a big cabinet, you'd normally find it on the end of rows of arcades, wouldn't you? Not kind of in the middle?
Yeah, you know what? I've never even thought about that. But yeah, you are right. You'd always find it on the end, or as now when I go to Skegness or, you know, Cleethorpes, it's usually there in the corner on its own.
You know, they've been smashing these out. Like, they've really had some good ones. Like, you mentioned Mortal Kombat, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and now that Outrun as well, Killer Instinct, now The Simpsons. Like, what do you think's going to be coming up next? Are they going to run out of arcade systems?
I really want them to. I really want to see some, you know, light gun ones from them. That's what I really want to see. You know,
that'll be tough, won't it? Because they're all on those screens, aren't they?
Yeah, they're on, you know, flat screens and stuff. So it'd be tough for them to make it. But what I really like about this is they've even got, obviously it probably won't be functioning, but they've even got like down to the coin operator at the bottom and everything is on there. Imagine that you come around my house, Joe, and I'm like, you have to put 20p in first before you ever go. Yeah, you're on the door with like a, you know, like, come on then, it's £1 to get in, then it's 20p wait to have a play. But what I really love is they have used the original artwork, you know, which was on the original, and it's like the proper 1991 Simpsons. So Bart's even in his blue outfit rather than his red outfit, what he wear, you know, his orange like t-shirt and stuff. So it's the proper classic, you know, Simpsons when they still had the white school rather than the yellow school and everything.
Crazy Taxi, that's my guess.
Yeah, that would be a good one, Crazy Taxi. But what I also like, what I heard, which I also like is making me feel really old, is this is to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the game as well. That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Because you're right, it was quite an early Simpsons game. I mean, it must have been in development for like a year before it came out, I imagine, or, you know, quite a while before. Because Marge has actually got her bunny rabbit ears in this. I was about to say that. I forget the name of it, but it was Matt Groening's other like creation, wasn't it, with the rabbit things with the ears? And if Marge gets electrocuted in this, you can see her rabbit ears in her hair. And yeah, because that was a joke, wasn't it, that Marge's hair was so big that it was concealing big rabbit ears, but obviously they decided not to go with that in the TV show.
Isn't Smithers different in this?
I believe it is the Smithers we know in this one, because it was only the first season where Smithers has a different complexion, which randomly changed. Yes, I mean, just for pure nostalgia, that game just brings back so many memories seeing that arcade cabinet. But today I still think it is one of my favourite multiplayer games. And I know when we've done live streams in the past, you know, all there with our controllers, even just playing it on Xbox Live, still great fun. So I haven't got an arcade cabinet at the moment, but as I've mentioned on the show, I'm getting my garage converted. And we got together, didn't we, at the weekend, and we were talking about this cabinet, and I was saying, you know, the amount of times I've said like, oh, I really want to buy that. And I'm just like, oh my God, I really want to buy that.
What you guys need to do is you both need to do it at the same time, and then your missuses will be like angry. Like, they won't be like, oh, Dan's got an arcade cab. They'll be like, Dan and Joe. And
we'll just claim that somebody sent them us. Arcade 1UP sent them us. They sponsored us. If you're listening, Arcade 1UP, and you'd like to save our relationships, then feel free to donate a couple to the podcast. But yeah, in all seriousness, no, this looks incredible and something I definitely want to get my hands on. It's just, what an incredible game. So can't wait to see what they do next. Keep up the good work. Now, maybe you've managed to get your hands on a PlayStation 5. I've been trying since December last year, still haven't got one. But maybe when you do get your hands on one, you think, that doesn't look retro enough. Well, this is really cool. This is a PlayStation 5 that has been turned into a gorgeous wooden retro gaming console. Now, you remember back in the day, I mean, there wasn't a load of wooden gaming systems. I do remember, obviously, the late 70s, that kind of wood grain look was everywhere. And obviously we had the Atari 2600 Woody edition. You know, they were made of wood, I believe, or just look like wood grain. But you don't really get many wooden systems these days. But this is a YouTuber, and he's called DIY Perks, Matthew Perks, who's actually managed to transplant the innards of a PlayStation 5 into a case that, looking at it, you wouldn't even think this thing was a games console, would you? He's done such a good job of this because it actually looks modern, but with that, like you say, that wooden 70s wood grain effect. But this is something I'd expect to see in my dad's house. Like, my dad's a sucker for, like, you know, these kind of like modern technology, little stylish, you know, boxes. Like, I would, if I saw this like under my dad's TV and he just turned around and said, oh yeah, it's like a digi set top box, but it's just like a nice one or something. Like, I wouldn't question anything he told me this was. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's got carbon fiber on it as well, which has kind of added to the look. So you've got like the natural style and the carbon fiber. I think you're right about the look as well. It's something like that Tecmo would love. But I also think the ventilation on there, that I've heard massive problems about the PS5 melting and all of that. And it actually looks like, even though it's made out of wood, it, you know, obviously flammable material, but it's got the vents at the back and at the top, and it looks like it's actually better ventilated than the PS5 original case.
What I find interesting is how much smaller he's made it.
Yeah,
you know, I watched the video and he took it apart and he was surprised at the actual PlayStation 5 itself. You know, once you take the case off and stuff, it's quite, I wouldn't say it's small, but it's a lot smaller than what you would think. And it's actually the cooling system on the back, which is actually taking up most of the space. And then also it is kind of like a weird shape. So what I liked about it is he put some legs on it to make it stand flat, because obviously the PS5 doesn't, it looks better kind of stood upright, doesn't it? It looks like it would wobble. Yeah.
It looks weird on its side, doesn't it? Yeah.
So, it was interesting, you know, that I'm looking forward to seeing a PS5 Pro, put it that way, because I don't really like the look of the original PS5. So
he's put my wooden Amiga laptop to shame. This.
Well, this thing is made out of American dark walnut hardwood, and he's put those legs on. These are conical metal legs he's got on there as well. To me, it kind of looks like it should be like a late 1970s valve-based amplifier or something. You know, it looks like something. It's got a really cozy look to it, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, like one of those coffee warmers or something that you have it. You know, you put it on the fan vents. You have it next to your bed, and then you can get a PS5 coffee in the morning. You
know what? I think you've just hit the nail on the head there as well. Like, it looks like, when you just said it's an amp there, it looks like something that you would just connect your phone to and play music out of. You know, it just a speaker.
With the added bonus that if your house gets burgled and PS5s are scarce at the moment, they probably wouldn't take that.
Yeah, true. Well, they might do. I don't know what this is, I'll tell you that.
This looks rare and expensive.
Yeah, well, it is.
If you want to get hold of one, unfortunately, there is only one in the world. But I will link up his video in our show notes at theretrohour.com if you've got the skills to make your own, which I don't think any of us have, unfortunately. Now, of course, we have got lots of anniversaries at the moment, and this one, quite an obscure game, actually. I know you're a big Castlevania fan, Joe. Have you ever played Rondo of Blood?
I have. Funny enough, once again, I think it's the 30th anniversary of Castlevania Rondo of Blood, and this is coming to TurboGrafx 16. So just a little bit of history about Rondo of Blood. It was a TurboGrafx exclusive game, which was actually the prequel to Symphony of the Night, which was kind of like the big Castlevania game, the first kind of Metroidvania Castlevania game. But we never got a official Western release of this game. It only ever came out in Japan, and then we did get a SNES version of it. It was a port of it, you know, a little bit of a demake. It wasn't the same game, essentially. You know, it was a complete, you know, back in the day when you would get a Mega Drive game and a SNES game, and they were the same game, but they were different games. Do you know what I mean? It was very
different port, yeah.
Yeah, it was a different port. It was very much like that. So this is, you know, it's funny because the article does say this is the first time we're getting it in the West. But interestingly, there was actually a PSP port of it in 2007, and you can get it on the TurboGrafx 16 Mini and the PC Engine Mini and the Core Graphics Mini, the original version.
And the PS4, it was on the.
And it was on the PS4. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's saying it's the original. You know, it's the first release of it. But I guess it's the first release of it on TurboGrafx 16. So we're actually getting it as a physical TurboGrafx 16 on disc game from Limited Run Games. And this was actually part of an E3 announcement by Limited Run Games, which I love, that, like, you know, retro is so big still that it's making it to E3. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're going to be getting this later on this year. It doesn't say when we're going to be getting this, but it just says later this year. And Limited Run are an American company, but you can order from them. Funny enough, I ordered Castlevania for the Switch from them a couple of months ago, and it was like $15 delivery. You know, it was a bit of a treat for myself, but it wasn't an arm and a leg, do you know what I mean? So we will be able to get this in the UK if you do want to get it. But yeah, I think that's really cool for the collectors, you know, to actually, if you've got a TurboGrafx 16, to actually sit down and play a proper English translation of this classic Japanese game, which has been kind of like, I don't know, like a legendary game for like the last like 30 years. All these different obscure ways to try and play it. It's now like 30 years later, you can actually sit down and play it on your TurboGrafx 16 in America or in the UK.
You know what I think's cool about it as well is, I mean, obviously limited run games have done stuff for, you know, the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, but when they're getting into systems like this, you know, TurboGrafx/PC Engine, you know, the more obscure systems that, you know, I know it was big in parts of the world, but not over here. When they start paying attention to those kind of niche platforms, I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think, you know, it kind of comes back to what we're saying about with the Legend of Zelda Game & Watch. They're doing it for the fans. I can't see them being like, oh, this is a quick buck, this is a quick cash flow, because of they don't, with limited run, they don't make loads of them. They make like 5,000 of them or like 1,000 of them. Do you know what I mean? So this really...
Hence their name,
yeah. So this really will be limited. And, you know, to make that few of them, I can't imagine the profit margin is massive. Do you know what I mean? Because they're not unreasonable prices. They're just like new game prices, like $50 or $40, or, you know, I think my Castlevania for the Switch was like $35. So it's not silly money. You know, they're not putting them out like there's only 1,000 of these and it's $100 or $150. Like, I genuinely feel like they're doing it for the fan. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
I wonder how obscure they'd go. Would they do like a repress of Alfred Chicken for the Amiga CD32?
I wouldn't put it past them.
No one would. They're still selling copies of the original one of that, trying to shift them.
I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, they've done like Corpse Killer, and, you know, they've done a lot of like, you know, Sega 32X games and Sega CD games and stuff like that. So obviously, I don't think this is the first TurboGrafx game they've done. I think they've done a couple of others already. But yeah, that would be funny if they started doing Amiga and the 3DO and the CDI and stuff like that.
yeah. Get that Zelda game on the CDI repress.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Nintendo would probably stop them straight away. Yeah, we don't know what you're on
was
about.
that? Plumbers don't wear ties. I'm sure that.
Yeah, plumbers don't wear ties. Limited run.
I'd buy that. So yeah, very, very cool. And of course, if you want to get hold of that, release date is coming, but we'll keep an eye on it. And of course, we'll put everything we know in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, before we deep dive into the demo scene, time to talk about this. Super Mario Kart, the original game. Now, a lot of people find the original Mario Kart on the SNES a bit of a tough play these days. I must admit, I did revisit it about probably 5 years ago. So I got an EverDrive, but obviously it couldn't do the Super FX emulation like the early EverDrive. So I actually bought one of the original carts off eBay. Going back to it after playing, you know, Mario Kart 8, for example, it's definitely dated in many ways, but there's no denying that obviously it was a game that started the series, and it was revolutionary. I don't know if you guys were fans of it back in the day.
Yeah, it was like massively ahead of its time. I remember when it came out, people's minds were blown. It was really fantastic, and just the way that it worked as well, being able to see all the characters on the track and kind of the progression, you know, where you were in the race, as well as having that kind of floor that they had and the way that it was drawn. It was beautiful.
I think what always throws me, it's not so much the graphics or anything like that, because obviously we're all retro gamers, you know, that's hence the retro hour. But what always took me out of it when I go back to it is I always forget that it's only half the screen. Like you said, Ravi, the bottom half is the map with, you know, where you are on the map and what position you're in and everything. So that always really took me out of it. So when I tend to go retro, I tend to go to Mario 64 or Double Dash for the GameCube. But yeah, this is really interesting. So as part of the Giga Leak, somebody has hacked it and restored the level editor for it, haven't they?
Yeah, so what happened was they basically found a prototype build from 1991. Yeah. And that had the code for a level editor in there. And the level editor allows stuff like 3D objects, like pipes and stuff, Monty Moles and Cheep Cheep. I'm not sure what those are, but they were probably the enemies and stuff.
Yeah.
Was that the little mole that popped up? It must
Monty Mole's the little mole that jumps out, and I think the Cheep Cheeps, I was going to say they're the fish, but they're not fish. I think they're chickens.
Yeah. Well, what happened was this guy, Mr. L314, worked on cracking the software, and the software is actually Super Famicom DOS, and that was an in-house operating system which was used for SNES development. So it kind of allowed you, with a keyboard and a mouse attached to the SNES, to then write data onto the console. So, you know, you wouldn't use like a PC as like a lot of these systems had. You would just be doing it directly on the SNES. So he managed to unlock this mode, kind of rebuild it, and it looks really cool, this level editor, because there's it's all above view. You can basically zoom into sections of it, and it's also split screen like the game is. And it looks really good fun. I'm sure it's going to get turned into like a, Mario Maker style levels, and there's going to be all kinds of madness going on. And like, I know you guys rag a bit on the kind of playability of Mario Kart now, but when it came out, it was like the fastest thing around, with that many players being able to play on it at the time. So yeah, it does kind of look dated now, but I do remember when it came out, it was like, oh my God, what is this?
Well, there is, if you look at I'll link up the Kotaku article that kind of goes in depth into this, and someone does point out in the comments, and I do remember seeing this actually, there is a free Mario Kart editor that came out around 10, 15 years ago called Epic Edit. Okay. You can download, and you can edit every track on there as well and make your own, if you're playing on emulation, that kind of thing. But this, what's cool about this is this is obviously Nintendo's in-house editor that I imagine they used to develop the game with back in the day. But can you imagine how different, God, the amount of time I would have spent on that game if, like, as a 10-year-old or whatever, me and my brother could sit there, like, making our own courses. That would have been amazing if they bundled that with the game.
Now, that would have been ahead of its time. Yeah, that would have been mind-blowing.
And Street Racer, do you remember that as well? That was
I remember Street Racer.
We had Mev Dink on the show, and he was like, oh, we can have, I think it was 8 players on there, or some mad amount of players.
Yeah, so looking forward to seeing what the community does with this. Another big find from the Giga League. Does make you wonder, how long we're going to keep finding things out from that huge collection. Obviously, we know the way it was kind of acquired is a bit dodgy, but can't deny how fascinating it is seeing all of these.
I feel like we have something from the Nintendo Giga League like every week at the moment, and it's been going on for like months. So I'm sure there'll be more. It's
taken him that long to trawl through it, hasn't it? Since the leak, keep
absolutely.
Finding things.
30 years from now, I'm sure they'll still be finding things in that collection. So very, very cool indeed. Now, last week's show, we're a bit too busy to fit this in, actually. We ran out of time, but we have been doing gaming shops of the week recently, and we're back on board with this as well. The idea is that if you've got a shop that you go to, a place where you go to buy your retro games, your retro systems, rather than buying them off eBay or Amazon or places like that, we want to show them some love and big up those remaining retro gaming shops all around the world. Give them some free advertising on the show, and we want you to tell us why your local retro gaming shop is so amazing. So now, you guys, I still haven't been out retro gaming shopping since everything reopened. You guys seem to be doing it every other day at the moment.
I did it for my birthday last week, and that's probably about the third or fourth time, probably the fourth time I've done it in the last kind of like 2 or 3 months. So I'm definitely getting it in and definitely spending too much money. But yeah, Ravi, you've got a really unique retro gaming collection at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm going for like PC titles, and the problem is I'm going too often. So all the charity shops, I've rinsed them all out now, and it's all just FIFA now. I need to wait for them to restock.
But obviously we love, proper, dedicated retro gaming stores. So if you've got one nearby that you go to, it could be anywhere in the world, drop us an email, show@theretrohour.com. We want to give a shout out to your local retro gaming shop. And this week, we've got a mention from a gaming shop in Scotland.
Yeah, so this is in Kilmarnock, Scotland. And I'm going to say this wrong, aren't I? Ayrshire? Ayrshire, that's it. God. So at 2000 DC said, please give a shout out to the newest retro gaming and collectible store in the deepest, darkest Ayrshire. Forgotten Worlds. It hasn't been long, but it's a treasure trove of imported games and collectibles, and it has arcade cabs as well. Totally awesome. So looking at this place, it looks like a warehouse.
I was going to say, I'm looking at the pictures of this, and I'm like, is that a warehouse? Like, is that a shop? It's like in the middle of a field, but I'm assuming you go in, and it looks like it's just shelves and shelves of retro games and boxes of retro games, and then like you say, there's like a back room full of like wrapped up arcade machines, and they're all like Japanese ones and stuff.
Yeah, so it's off the A735, and it seems like they've got a Facebook page. It's in Unit 23 as well, so it's like a a proper kind of industrial one, but it's a huge warehouse set up by a collector. And they've got absolutely everything there. They've got like ColecoVision games, Atari games, tons of box systems, all for sale. Lots of kind of sealed stuff as well. PlayStation collections, Dreamcast, and tons of arcades to play. So this looks like a kind of secret little haven in Scotland that you can go and just pick up some games and play on some arcades as well in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm looking through their pictures on their Facebook. Boxed original Xbox there, boxed Atari Jaguar for sale as well, limited Halo Edition Xbox. They've got loads of systems here, and those arcade machines look amazing. I mean, I imagine the fact that these are all wrapped up, these must be for sale then.
Yeah, well, I think that's him actually setting up because, like you said, it's a new place, so there's not that much photos of it at the moment. They've just got their Facebook page, and it seems like it's newly been established.
Well, it looks amazing. Forgotten Worlds, it's called. So if you want to check that out, I'll link up. Have they got a website at the moment?
No, it's just a Facebook.
Or is it that new?
At the moment.
Right, okay. I will put a link to their Facebook page in our show notes. So it is amazing, especially to see. I mean, we've talked about retro gaming shops that have been there 20, 30 years when new ones are springing up, especially in, the difficult climate that we've got in terms of retail right now. That is a big investment and a big commitment, so you definitely need to show these guys some support. Forgotten Worlds up there in Ayrshire in Scotland. I'll put a link to their Facebook page in our show notes at theretrohour.com. And of course, do let us know about your favourite retro gaming shop. You can do it on our socials at Retro Hour UK. If you want to do it on Twitter or our Facebook page, drop us a message on there. Our Discord, you can do it, or email show@theretrohour.com. Now, of course, the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each week with our incredible friends at Bitmap Books. And, we say it all the time. These are books that I think these books are as collectible as the games.
Yeah, absolutely. These books are absolutely beautiful, these books are. And this week, we're actually going to be talking about one of my favourite game series, Metal Slug, The Ultimate History by Bitmap Books.
Yeah, now this is the first officially licensed book to talk about the history of, it is one of gaming's most beloved franchises. Were you a fan of the original game? Obviously came out back in 96, wasn't it, the original?
Yeah,
Metal
it's like
Slug?
95, 96. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Metal Slug. I've got them all. One of those games where all of them have come out on every single console, since coming out in the arcade and stuff like that. And it was only actually last year that I played through like all of them on Xbox Live and literally got like 1,000 points achievements on all of them. I absolutely loved them. So I absolutely love and adore this book as well. And what's really cool about this book is it's obviously the complete history of like every single Metal Slug game that came out, but there's also loads of exclusive interviews with some of the creators of Metal Slug and some of the people who worked on the original games, as well as loads of original artwork and also unseen artwork, so never before, behind the scenes artwork, which people hadn't seen before.
Yeah, because SNK have actually given them access to their archives.
Yeah.
So you've got, this really high resolution concept artwork and illustrations and stuff. You can see the original designs of the game and how it changed as well. And there's also stories in here as well, including the truth about Metal Slug Zero, that was the version of Metal Slug that existed before Marco and Tama.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
So you only controlled a tank in that game as well.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. That's cool.
Yes, you can see the roots of the game as well. So if you're a fan of it, you've got to check it out. 452 pages. Like all their books, it's incredible quality, high quality lithographic print. They use special ink as well to make the images just jump off the page. So if you want to check that out, of course, really appreciate you supporting our sponsors. They're what keep this show going. Have a look and I'm sure you'll enjoy this book, Metal Slug, The Ultimate History, and see their full range of incredible retro gaming books on their website at theretrohour.com. Now, we do have a patron that we run for this show as well, and the reason that we have a patron is really just to cover the expenses of doing this show, because, we love doing the podcast each week, but it is nice if we don't have to pay to do the show ourselves as well. There's always ongoing costs too, and obviously, we're not all take. We give back as well. Now, obviously, the Retro Hour podcast, it's an independent show. It is just us three gaming fans who love talking about retro games every week. We're not owned by a big media company or anything.
And you know what? Funny you should say that. It was only about a year and a half ago.
We've just been bought out.
No, we haven't been bought out. But about a year and a half ago, we won't say who, but we were approached. And, no, we're still independent, aren't we? So, and it is thank you to our Patreons that we've been able to stay independent. And, and like you say, we're not just, take. We do like to give back. So, Dan, what do we give in return?
Well, this weekend, we're going to be doing our monthly Patrons Hangout. That is always one of the highlights of the month. That's where on Sunday evening, 8 p.m, we get together on Google Meet and we just talk about so much on there as well. It's not always gaming, is it? It can be anything retro.
We were talking about video nasties and, VHSs last time, weren't we? We were all talking about RoboCop and Fright Night and stuff like that. Like you say, it's not just retro
movies.
gaming. Kung Fu movies, yeah, absolutely.
And there's always a bit of a collection porn moment as well, especially when we get new people on. It's like, it shows your collection then. That's always fun. So if you'd like to join us for that, we're going to be doing it on Sunday evening this weekend at 8 p.m. The link will be in our Patreon page. And also before that, we're going to be recording the latest episode of our exclusive Patrons podcast, The Retro Hour After Hours. Now, we do loads of different things on our second podcast. It's a bit more free-flowing than this. We don't edit it. We do a different theme every time. The most recent one was a full hour all about the Sega Mega Drive and our memories and talking about...
Was it an hour? Was it like an hour 40 in the end or something like that?
Actually, I think it was probably a bit longer, actually. Just talking about all the mad add-ons that the Mega Drive had and, going back into our memories of it too. And we also do alternate months. We do a series called The Retro Years. So this weekend, we're going to be recording a full special all about the year 2001. So we're going to be jumping in the DeLorean, going back 20 years. We've already been prepping for this, and there's so much happened in that year.
Oh man, like installing Windows XP. I've been, using iTunes for the first time.
Spoilers.
Plugging in my iPod.
Yeah, first iPod came out, the original Xbox, the GameCube as well. So it's going to be a really interesting one, I think. And obviously, we're going to be talking about movies and music and culture and what we were doing back in 2001. So if you want to dive into the DeLorean with us and travel back 20 years, make sure you check out the latest episode of our Patrons exclusive podcast, The Retro Hour After Hours. You also get the normal podcast early most weeks. You get it ad-free as well. So really the reason you're supporting us on Patreon is just to keep the show going. Think of it as a little tip jar and it'll help us keep it coming out every single Friday. And of course, you will get a mention in the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Like this week, a big thank you, Jorgen Jacobson,
Nor Gamer,
Rob Schneider,
Full Install,
and Sean Allen,
who all made donations into our Patreon. That is massively appreciated. Thank you so much for keeping this podcast going. And if you'd like to join them, all the details for our Patreon you'll find on our website at theretrohour.com. All right, next, we're going to get some amazing stories, of course, talking about the past, but also the future of the demo scene as well, with two of our favourite demo producers, Tobias and Life, otherwise known as Melkor and No Name, from Haujobb, next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time for this week's very special guests. And it's been a while since we did an episode delving deep into the demo scene, and it's always something that we find fascinating, being lifelong fans of those incredible productions from back in the day that still continues today at massive events all around the world, including Evoke Demo Party that we'll talk more about very soon with our special guest this week. Hello, Tobias and Life from Haujobb. Hello, guys.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you joining us. Now, before we delve deep into kind of the work that you guys have done on the demo scene and continue to do today, it's always nice to kind of find out, your geek credentials and kind of what got you into it originally. Talking to you, Tobias, what's kind of your experience in computers from the beginning then? What kind of got you into it at first?
So I think the really first moment was games, definitely. I mean, even before stumbling over the cracker scene in the neighboring town to copy some discs, but really it was like Centipede, I think in primary school, so at a friend's house. So I really, when I saw that, I immediately fell in love. So yeah.
And what about you, Life?
Yeah, we had one of those Pong TV telegames consoles at home. So I was the youngest child of 3. And so that's how I got nurtured into computer graphics and games and so forth. And there was some Galaga arcade machine in the milk bar during our holidays that took one mark or the other. And then later on, we got some Commodore 16 at home, which I shared with my sister. And then we finally got a machine for myself, C64 with disk drive and speeders. Must have been around 87 or so.
Well, you guys are both in the demo group, Haujobb, and your scene names, I might as well tell everybody, Melkor is yours, Tobias, and No Name is yours, Life, as well. And you must have both been kind of fascinated by computer graphics. What were the graphics that really caught your attention, even if they were on like television or other mediums?
I think by the time, so it was really, I mean, everybody I think was impressed by what was going on music television. And so I think everybody during those days was hoping to create something on 64, especially then Amiga, like the early demos from Spaceballs, for example, which were kind of recreating this music video style. That was later on in the early 90s. So I think that was a very huge influence by the time to have this synesthetic experience for music videos, but created via computers.
Yeah, if I might chip in, I think for me, coming from the Gallagher machine in the milk bar in my holiday when I was a kid, I wanted to have something like that at home. So I was craving to get the Commodore and get the tapes at first and play them on my telly. Can't really tell that the Pong machine had a lasting graphical impact on me, but of course that was also fascinating as a very small child. And then I enjoyed the crack throws on my C64, to be honest. I mean, I stumbled across the occasional disc which seemed to have crack throws on them, but no games, so that was a bit strange. Or just music. I remember especially I had something with the Michael Jackson music, the Smooth Criminal made by Charles Deanan of Maniacs of Noise in around 88. And I was really fascinated by that. And I thought, what's that? So I think the next year I visited a friend who had an Amiga 500. I still didn't have one at that time. And I adored the crack throws on that machine as well. So there was something from World of Wonders, which had wonderful music, crack throw for California games. And he recognized that I liked that. And he told me, if you like this, you will especially like that. And so he went to another room, got some disc and showed me my first demo that I recognized as being a demo because I've been told it is something like that. And that was Doc Demo 2 music disc from 89. And since then I'm kind of hooked on this marvelous machine that is the Amiga and its creative use in the demo scene ever since.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you're mentioning that because, I mean, the C64 times, I mean, were also the time of when I think I was watching more the crack throws in front of the games and was wondering who are these ludicrous names like Dynamic Duo, etc. And I later on learned about, but the more active phase was definitely starting with Amiga and from then on, of course, when we also were starting the group many groups were started by the time on Amiga.
Yeah, I mean, it looks so intriguing, didn't it? The fact that you could get these incredible graphical demos and scrolling text and, these recognizable mod tracks as well that they squeeze into just, the boot sectors of floppy disk before the games. What was kind of your introduction into the demo scene then? How from just watching these crack throws did you actually get into a group and get started?
On my end, it was really driving to a neighboring village where there was the rumor there was someone who had a good source of computer games. So all the school kids, so that was near Paderborn, where also later on an important university for IT was, and many demo sceners started studying there and came there actually in that area. And there was this person who had always 18, 90 discs of games, and they were in the early 90s, so 91, 90, 1990 maybe. And basically he was in a demo scene or in the cracker scene at that time and had kind of this abonnements with school kids where everybody was driving there once a month, copying a lot of games and then driving home again. And that group, so the person from the group was Agnostic Front by the time, which was a crack group, and I joined soon later. And because I was also in the Gothic scene, and they were also a Gothic noise industrial kind of group, and that really overlaps oftentimes that you have music identification and demo scene identification. That's why Haujobb, by the way, because it's really a noise industrial group from the mid-90s.
What about your life? How did you get into it?
I think I was a bit of a lone rider at home at first, so I didn't find anyone that really shared the passion. So I kind of got on making my own stuff. I bought Amos, the game creator, to have a more flexible programming environment on the Amiga before I learned assembler. So I spent some time on that and went to local bulletin board systems, downloaded stuff, didn't really have any contact. And I mean, there have been guys in our neighborhood, but I was too shy to really approach them. I mean, the Red Sector guys that made the famous Mega demo, they were only 20 kilometers away from me, but kind of, they seemed to be too high up to send them something, and they probably wouldn't have answered. You never know, but I mean, they got tons of letters back in the day and in response to their productions. And also on my schoolyard, they had the Special Brothers, which was another big group of the time. And I chatted them up, but I couldn't really speak to the coder. I was too impressed, so I spoke to the graphics guy, which was kind of the wrong decision in a way. Should have just asked the coder and maybe get an afternoon lesson or something. But anyway, at some point on a bulletin board system, I downloaded a slideshow made by students or school kids, and it says sci-fi slideshow, not bad. Made by Sector 7. I downloaded that. I found out they live in the next village. I was super happy, phoned them up, and ever since then, I've been teamed up with them and did demo first for Sector 7. And then after we made the first proper demo, we joined with Haujobb in 97.
Yeah, it's kind of like in MMOs, right? So if in this first moment, you find someone you really resonate and then join a group, and then you're really stuck to a game for a long time. If you don't do that, then maybe you switch something else. For me, that was really Triple X from Haujobb, who was pretty well known in the scene till today.
Well, you mentioned BBSs there, and that was kind of the pre-social media. And I guess that's how you guys communicated. But did you get together for parties, and like how big were these initial demo parties, and what activities took place there?
I think the big thing in the 90s especially was always going to the party in Denmark. That was usually during Christmas, or then of course going to Mecca Symposium, and later on Breakpoint, and later on Revision. That's always on Easter. But in the 90s, that was maybe 2000, I guess. No name, what do you think? I'm not sure about the numbers, but I guess it was 2,000 people in the north of Denmark, right in the winter, in the dark, where everybody drove from all over Europe. And
yeah. Absolutely right.
It was kind of a very open-minded space at the time, because people came really for copying everything.
I learned about it from the magazines. Yeah, so we all had our magazines back in the day. We still have some today, and they had some reviews about demo scene events and the current ones. And so I wanted to go to the party ever since I read about it. Must have been 92, 93, and I finally made it to my first demo scene party in 94. First, it was a local, national World of Commodore 94 party. A mind that. Commodore went into demise in 1994, so it was more like a morning thing. And but still, we had a party and decided to go to the party 94 in Denmark at that year. And I think it was even more, Toby. I think it was like 3,500 or 4,000 people.
Yeah,
it was absolute madness. I mean, they filled trade fair halls full of computer lines. It was absolutely mind-boggling. And you felt like you were coming home as kind of nerdy kid back in the day. I mean, all kinds of events were happening. Competitions, of course, that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to be part of the scene, being recognized, being on the big screen at some point. But that was something for the big boys, maybe. And so there were also other competitions. I remember when I entered the TP4, there was some hard disk throwing going on, and I was kind of walking through a big hall, and a hard disk was flying by, and I was like, "Wee, it's a bit crazy over here."
It's true, and it's also super important always, if you imagine these big halls of people, it's really, and there was actually no LAN. Few people have been playing, but there was no competition games going on. It was really, everybody was there chatting around the competitions, around how whoever created an amazing demo the party before, and how that might be surpassed on this competition, and of course catching up with friends on groups, and also this. What's important about the demo scene is always this competition meets community. So you look what the others are doing, but you are also friends with everybody. So that's really these two mindsets very largely intertwined. And that's super important to imagine. If you go to a demo party till today, it has always these two parts, community and competition. And it was in the 90s like that. And today it's the same.
I love that you mentioned hard disk throwing, because I love like the wild kind of competitions and the more unusual stuff that happens. Like I've been to ones where they have non-dominant hand drawing and photography. What weird kind of stuff have you seen like that?
Since I'm already laughing. I mean, I won floppy disk throwing, so 3.5-inch floppy disk throwing. I could really spin it nicely, like you did with a stone on a lake, and then I think it went 90 or 100 meters or something at some party in Holland or Belgium. I can't really remember. There was something in artificial ponds, if I remember, at Mecca.
Yeah, and that's also super important. There's always the wild competition. So that's like a competition category, which is actually no category. Everything is allowed. So you can enter a quiz, or you enter a video, or you can enter sending a demo on via satellite into space, which TSI did recently. So it could be so many things, and people get each year different, until today, if different ideas, what that can be. So that's it can be very crazy.
I mean, if people want to get like an overview of what it was like, there are videos on YouTube. There are a few of the party I've seen on there. And like you guys mentioned, then it just looks like a massive hall, filled with mainly teenagers and, people in the early 20s maybe. And I know there's disc-based magazines like Grapevine that are still available. People can read the show reports and stuff. I mean, are there any kind of favourite parties or memories that kind of stand out, for you in particular?
I think at least for me, so what influenced me for the whole life was really this: you are living on the countryside somewhere and you're suddenly part of a community which is all around, at least Europe. But for us, it felt like the world. So there was no Schengen, and there was no Euro, there was no nothing. And I was like sitting this first time at home in front of the BBS in a terminal, and then another person in Sweden is answering on a hacked, or it's not a hacked line, but let's say a telephone line where you didn't have to pay for the long distance fees. And that was this moment which I'll never forget, because it's always, I guess, that's why I'm also doing conferences as a professional these days. I was always drawn by the community, by bringing people together who create awesome stuff. And so my answer will always probably be in that direction. And No Name, how was it for you?
Yeah, I always wanted to see the great new demos, and obviously also intros and graphics and so forth. So I preferred the parties that had the great releases. And of course, the best ones were where we then also had a release and maybe even one. But that's not the main point. So I like the big parties. And for me, it was parties like the party back then the German Easter party tradition, which started in 1995, if I remember correctly. So symposium and later Mecca symposium, more parties like that. So where the great stuff happened. So for me personally, a big highlight was winning a demo competition at Mecca Symposium 1999, or 2K-1 as they called it. That was great. So for me, always about seeing new production and then speaking to people.
Do you think like the demo scene, the creativity in there and the coding actually feeds into kind of wider computer technology and influences some game development?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say it's also mutually beneficial. I mean, at first it has been inspired by games and wider technology, obviously, because demos of something are demos of technology, and that was there before the demo scene. And also the genesis of Cracktros is very closely related to having computer games available as software that can be copied without having any kind of quality loss. Yeah, maybe even a quality improvement with Trainer or something like that. And then on the other way around, you've then at some point got well-versed demo sceners that are looking for a job and, of course, would like to apply it in a domain that they like. And, maybe they become game developers. That's kind of one possible circle of life in that little habitat.
Yeah. And the interesting part is also you can see, so when we will talk a little bit later about that, about this UNESCO Art of Coding thing, but the interesting part is you can see how many people have been influenced by the scene. If you looked when we announced like there was a success in Finland and Germany, Hacker News picked it up, which is a big news outlet in Silicon Valley, especially. And suddenly we had like more than 400,000 views on a tweet for account, which there were only 200 followers or so. So, and there were so many comments on Hacker News, how the demo scene has actually inspired people to go into tech and coding and in all different directions. Could be security, could be creative coding, of course, shaders for sure, engine development in game studios. You always find demo scene is there. So it's kind of this little bit hidden group, especially in the Scandinavian game development industry, where there's many sceners who started stuff and are still around.
I'd say it's interesting also that we like to stay in our niche a little bit, although there's these outreach activities and the cultural recognition activities. In a way, we are cultivating our little niche and broadcast chrome flowers, as we put in one of our demos. And you may go away and do something else, but we won't follow.
I mean, you mentioned Cracktros earlier on, and to me, as someone that was just, I didn't attend the parties in the early 90s. I was just reading about them, on disc mags and stuff. But it always did seem to me like the demo scene and piracy kind of went hand in hand. Even watching those YouTube videos, the X copy bong is going off in the background all the way through it. I mean, would you agree that kind of piracy and the demo scene were like intertwined at the time? And how do you think they kind of separated and it kind of moved on from piracy?
I think there is no 100%. So yeah, first, yes, it has been largely, I mean, the demo scene was the cracker scene. I think so. The demo scene started as the cracker scene. So in the 80s, 100%. In the 90s, it overlapped still in big chunks. And I think everybody will tell you a little bit different story. I can say in the German scene around myself from 94 on, that was also when we co-founded like Haujobb. From 94 on, like legal prosecution was much stronger, that people were raided, etc. Like their houses were checked for copies, people were drawn to courts, etc. And I think I remember CeBIT 94 as one moment where lots of people switched from the cracker groups to demo groups, or let's say they were founding demo groups which were completely on the legal side, and then there were other groups which stayed in the cracker scene, and then I think over the 90s, I think 95% I would say is then completely demo scene. So it slowly went down, but I think mid-90s, and there's also technological reason, because demos got bigger and bigger and bigger, and there was, of course, no space on the boot block anymore to show always even bigger effects. And so when demos took over all full discs, which was really, especially with the Amiga, so early 90s, let's say 93, 94, that really started big time. That was also when there was no cracked game actually after the intro or the demo, because it was just standing for itself. So that's two reasons.
Yeah, I think on the C64, I didn't own an original. On the C16, everything was original. Obviously, the Pong console was original. And on the Amiga, I didn't really care for the copies anymore. It was easy to get, but I wanted to own the digital stuff that I loved. So I bought all the great games that I wanted to have. So for me, for example, Turrican 1, 2, and 3. I have all the originals, and I'm really happy that I have them. And for the Cracktros and stuff like that, that was the interesting subculture that I wanted to be part of somehow. And they were just getting bigger and bigger. I mean, they were escaping the boot block very, very soon. Mostly they were around 30, 40 kilobytes, which is maybe why we have these size limits for some of the intros around 40 kilobytes or 64 kilobytes. So you would also hear a little bit of tuck, tuck, tuck. And each of those would have been 11 kilobytes on the Amiga, if I remember correctly. And it was just more interesting. I mean, you can only play so many games, I guess. And at some point you want to switch over from being a consumer to becoming a producer. At least hopefully, not everyone, but some people want to, and that's what interested me.
Were there a kind of set of rules and ethics in the demo scene, and especially regarding like people ripping off other people's artworks or productions?
It's a good question, because I think the ethics, I mean, what we always say and what's really true is the demo scene is decentral, anarchic, and self-organized. Means you can't really say what the demo scene does or did so there could be cases, but in a general could be cases of like copying stuff or playing around. But usually the mindset has been create your own stuff, pushing the boundaries to create better stuff or what others did. And I guess that's why also it was always a little bit looked down towards people who use demo makers, at least in the 90s. Because yes, the artwork was there, but not the craft behind. And so I would say being original is a super high value, and pushing the boundaries as well. And I think the demo scene had also a long time this saying of open source kills the competition, which is of course not what is the mindset these days. So people are really releasing their source codes from nowadays, oftentimes, but it doesn't have to be. But oftentimes, really, at those days, it was really, let's see what we can do better than these other guys. Oftentimes, it was guys, and then the conversation in the community is actually bringing each other together. So if you dare to ask the other coders and graphicians and musicians, then it's super open and super welcome and inclusive. But you had to have this, you had to step over your comfort zone and to reach out. And actually, but if you were at a demo party, then everybody was actually always saying, yeah, then it's super welcoming. But it's not that welcoming or it wasn't that welcoming like, let's say, the indie scene was in that sense, because it was more based on competition, and that changed over the decades then.
Yeah, I always remember reading about, like kind of obviously had the elites who made all the, the top demos, and then they'd often call, people that used, for example, Amos Basic to make demos, like the lamers. I remember reading that, there did seem like a definite hierarchy there.
Oh, yes. I mean, when we tried to enter the scene, I was a bit late to the party. I was, not an early scener. And the elite, as you mentioned, were already dominating the scene. It was very hard to get recognized. I mean, there were the big Dick Smacks, and you would release your first demo, and maybe it wouldn't even be mentioned, or it would be mentioned by looking down on it. And that was no fun in the 90s. That's a lot more welcoming nowadays. And for rules, as Toby said, I mean, yeah, it was about being creative, having fun, cooperating, and showing your stuff. And the productions matter, whatever your productions are, but it ideally should have been your productions. Everything that you try to present as your production, and it wasn't really, has always been frowned upon, rightfully. But well, if you had something that was worth showing, you would get involved, enter it into some kind of competition, socialize with everyone, tell them that you've done great stuff, and they can check it on the big screen very, very soon, and you watch the compo together, and then afterwards you're sharing a beer, you get feedback, and then you repeat.
I mean, the mindset of the groups was also largely different. So Haujobb was more, we had, I don't know, at one moment, I guess more than 100 people in the group. And we had this recognition, yes, to win a lot of competitions, but there were also many party members just joining because we were a more party group. Then there were other groups which were super hierarchical and everything in between. And it's really interesting to see how the identity was taken super seriously in the beginning when someone joined, so switched groups from one to another. And nowadays, and also for a while, now it's totally normal that people are members of many groups and switch gears, even reinvent brands and names all the time to play around with it. So it was always playful, but the style of playful maybe changed
Oh yeah, I just have to chip in there. My dear friend JCS, hello, with whom I started my Amiga journey. He was also a co-member of Scoopex at the time, which was one of those hierarchically organized groups. And I remember internal letters that he showed me, which weren't directed at him, but at other members who weren't that active at the moment. And they contained messages like, "A warning, contact the management at once." And we just didn't want to be a group like that or be in a group like that. So yeah, definitely more on the fun side of things.
That's yeah, it's true, and that it was even picked up by scientists. So Gleb Albert, actually a demo scener who is also writing a lot of research on the scene. He actually published a paper about how the early, especially the cracker groups, were even in re-establishing kind of corporate structures. So it was RSI.inc or so even names and corporate structures, while even in illegality, I don't know what's the word, in an illegal status.
Illegality, yeah?
Illegality, yes. Thank you. And I mean, there's much to be said. What's special about this moment, because before there was just the book age, right? And we were just making up stuff while it was invented, and we had no idea in what special moment in time this was all happening.
Well, I know that the obviously the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, were two, the dominant platforms in the demo scene. But I mean, were there any other representations at these parties? Like, was the Atari ST? Did that have like a demo scene that was there? Was the Acorn Archimedes? I know there's some stuff on that, and I've even read, obviously when the IBM PC became more dominant, did you start to see more PC demos at parties? From the mid-90s.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, yeah, all of those machines, maybe less the Acorn, which wasn't really big on the continent, as you say, in Europe, which is a great machine. I saw one when I was an exchange student in England. All of them got great demos, and we've seen PC demos, we've seen Atari ST demos all the time. At first, maybe you want to stay in your swim lane somehow, and you don't really like to look so much to the others, but that soon changed, and we absolutely loved PC demos as well. I mean, I remember we were standing in our Amiga corner at a big party, must have been Mecca Symposium, I don't know which year, and they were showing a demo show with a famous PC demo called Wonders of the World, Stars, Wonders of the World by Noon. And it was magnificent. And everyone else was a bit, boo, that's PC. And we're just like, are you mad? And giving standing ovations because it was just so great. And we wanted to be as good as those guys, which had the slightly more powerful machine and having really great artists, great graphics, great musics. It's cross-fertilizing and, very, very inspiring to see other machines.
I do remember reading as well that some people would get a bit snobby about, doing demos on a PC. And even today, they're like, it's easy enough doing it via DirectX or something, but you're not banging the metal, so it's not quite as cool, that kind of thing.
It's true. It's still both out there. So, I mean, some people are creating demos on hacked washing machines also to have the pure metal work still there, even literally. Then there's definitely, of course, the retro scene, which was never retro because we just continued doing stuff on C64 and Amiga. So for us, it was always there. And then there's, of course, the PC scene, which was let's say pushing the boundaries in different directions where, of course, you could switch the graphics card and then it wasn't that easy to compare anymore how the excellence of someone is. But maybe things got much more aesthetically, or there were different routes of creativity to explore, let's say. I mean, which I'm not saying is that Amiga and C64 is not aesthetic.
I would add that the PC, because it has so much power and it's really great. Yeah, I have PC as well, of course, and I also program on the PC, or I did program on the PC. That you want to artificially limit it because the production capability that you have to bring up with your team or on your own is just mind-boggling. You are not a AAA team. You are not 80 people. You cannot compete anymore with AAA game studios. So you have to artificially limit what you want to do, or you will be completely lost. And that's I think, why we saw the introduction of size limits and other kind of artificial limits. I mean, on the PC nowadays, more recently, in more recent years, the size coding of 256 bytes or even less became a thing. On the Amiga, back when I started, that wasn't so big. I mean, an intro was a 40K intro because that was the side of the crack throw, and maybe they came up with bootblock intros or 4K intros, and that was small. But the size coding and other artificial limitations really is what drives the PC scene at the moment, I guess.
Which demo groups really impacted and kind of changed the demo scene, and how?
Apologies to everyone who I might have forgotten and wanted to mention in the first place, but from a technical and aesthetical perspective over time. So I've mentioned Red Sector before for the Mega demo. I think that was a very important release on the Amiga. And I can only really talk about Amiga. There's other great groups, but I'll stay with my Amiga opinion. It featured top music. It had a sampled speech intro, just like the then famous Blood Money game by DMA Design, and so they made that. So they were as good as a commercial title. Yeah, they also made an early tool, the Red Sector Demo Maker, which you could buy and do stuff and play around with that. Then there was a Mental Hangover by Scoopex, which introduced the Trackmo concept. So like a continuous disk loader from without using the operating system. It also had continuous music, and it would change the scenes on the fly. So you could have more effects, and it would be more tightly timed to the music, and it would be a more condensed experience. So they introduced that concept. As Toby said, many great demos existed. So Enigma by Phenomena, Hardwired, Chronix and the Silence, Desert Dream by Kefrons. That's all really great stuff. You had technical wizards like Sanity, Virtual Dreams, or the Electronic Knights. And then you had design groups, I would say, or people who made an impact on design, maybe not even being a design group in the first place, but Buttbrain, Mega Demo 1 and 2, I mean, they were hated back then in the demo scene, and we absolutely loved it as the consumers. And Buttbrain demos are cool demos. Melon Design, lots of famous, very influential French style, as Toby called it. And then there was Spaceballs, state-of-the-art, 9 fingers, fluid 2D motion vectors, rotoscoping and so forth. And then all our good friends since the AGA times of the mid-90s. Scala, always pushing the limits, Abyss and Lemon Point. Great demos, great tools. Unique, Ephedrina, always great demos. And our friends in Ghost Town, who are master artists.
That was like the audio version of the scrolly text shoutouts.
Yes, please. Of course. I mean, it's our tradition. You're speaking with us, so that's what we do. We can't type scroll
Got
text.
to be done. Well, Tobias, I know today, or pre-COVID at least, and hopefully again in the future, you're organising the Evoke party. So tell us about the demo scene today, and how does it differ from the demo scenes back in the early 90s?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, we're at Evoke, we're a huge team which is running. So we're running the demo party for 20 years now, and everybody's doing like their small part. I'm more like on the speakers and concept side and bringing people together for conversations. What's the difference? I think it's slowly getting more diverse. It's more open-minded in that sense that C64 scene and Amiga scene and PC scene is more mingling to it with each other. I mean, the big differences are we are getting older as well. That's also a challenge as well to be managed because we are a living, breathing culture where always new people are joining. But the scene is, of course, also getting older each year a little bit. And so differences are, the big thing is really its continuity. So when we actually applied to UNESCO and started like this whole initiative, Art of Coding, to enlist the demo scene as part of immaterial cultural heritage in Europe at the moment, that was really an important part, that it's a living, breathing culture which has its own rules, its own logics, etc. But it has also a heritage and a history which is continued and always renewing a bit. So there is change. There's always new parties coming. There's always new groups starting. But it has also, for the digital space, for 30 years or more, almost 40, it has a extremely strong continuity. And then it's, of course, what's a big thing is that the scene when it started was really like, demos could do what no one else could do oftentimes. So visually, they were much more impressive than the games after the intro or demo at the time. And then with the whole explosion of the games and real-time space in terms of engines and real-time, that's, of course, a different perspective now. So now it's many people, it's a space for many people who work professionally in digital in any kind of way. And oftentimes they do stuff in a demo scene just for the sake of it, just for the fun of it, just for actually doing something without sense, which is just for their own enjoyment and the community and whatever you aim for. So I think that's a big thing, that the competition was a big driver, and nowadays it's still important, but it's also being part of this community and sharing this unique time actually in digital history together, because you can't. It's like if you're an old World of Warcraft player. I mean, before vanilla came back, you couldn't talk about the old days because they were gone. There was updates and updates and updates, and you couldn't talk with people about how it was at that time. And that's, of course, something which is also driving the scene, like sharing these days.
Interestingly, that demographic breakdown, is it kind of mainly, us guys that were into it back in the 90s, like, people who are 35 and over? Or are you seeing younger people becoming interested in it as well?
Definitely. I mean, at Evoke, for example, we have a newcomer award each year, and there's never a scarcity to find a group. So Evoke has roughly 500 people usually coming. So it's second biggest, I think, party in Germany with an international audience. And we always have like awards for people who are first time releasing, or to give them some extra recognition, to be seen and actually also feel welcome. And it's also, and that's one of the reasons why we do this initiative Art of Coding, also to make people aware there is this scene which is actually self-limiting, so limiting itself for a purpose, and self-limiting for creative purpose. That's actually super old. It's really like, if you think about text, like we are writing sonnets for 400 or 500 years since the mid-century, medieval times. And so it's always in the same form. Or think of origami. So self-limitation can be really a nice driver of curiosity, of creativity, of bringing people together. And that's why I'm also not really worried about like the future, and that draws people always more in. Think about people who are coming from media arts, for example, and get interested. But there is, of course, also challenges in that sense, that the community has been historically pretty male, pretty European. That's something which is also changing definitely now these days. So, and actually, even families are usually, if you come to Evoke these days, there's lots of people bringing the next generation actually, and we have a kindergarten there.
Wow,
Yeah.
demo families.
I would like to chip in on the family side, actually. So all of what Toby said, plus we've got kids entering the scene, kids of demo sceners. We've seen that a couple of times. So Virgil, one of our musician friends, has a son, Slimy, and he entered the scene. And I think the same also happened with a young French group. I think one of the fathers is a famous graphic artist. So yeah, it's what you admire. Sometimes it's the technology that you want to play with, and sometimes it's what you've been shown how to do stuff. So kind of family aspects.
Well, Tobias, what is the Art of Coding initiative then, and why do you think it's been so successful?
So the Art of Coding is an initiative we founded together with Andreas Lange from Computer Games Museum, who was a co-founder of the Computer Games Museum in Berlin. It's like an initiative to enlist or inscribe, they say, the demo scene as first digital culture into UNESCO cultural heritage. So UNESCO, usually all of us know as the buildings like Stonehenge, etc., with preservation projects around them. And they have also lists of immaterial cultural heritage. So this is like traditions, arts and crafts, which are usually, so in the old world before we started, are centering around rural kinds of dances, rituals. Carnival in Cologne, for example, is such a, of course, important tradition, and could be also like certain style of printing. And the reason why we started was kind of a game. So why not trying to challenge UNESCO with the demo scene mindset, because no one has done it before, and see how far we get in asking this question about what is tradition, what is skills, what is craft in a digital sphere. And as the demo scene is completely non-commercial, it was really self-motivated. Everybody does. If you look at the definitions of a culture in terms of UNESCO terms, it actually works pretty well together. But usually they focused on something like, let's say, how is knowledge traversed or traditioned over the generations? So we had to tweak some of the arguments when we applied for in Finland or in Germany for the national inscription. So we had to tweak some of the rules in a sense and say, yeah, well, in the digital space, 30 or 40 years is actually much more than just one generation. And the knowledge is traditioned via conversation at demo parties where people gather and converse about the latest demo effects, etc. And honestly, that's true. I believe in that. So yeah, that's like this initiative. It's really a website, a campaign, and UNESCO, that takes all a little bit, it takes a while. So it means you have to apply in each country separately. And if we have applications in more than a certain amount of countries together, so now we have been successful in Germany and also Finland, that we are now national cultural heritage, which is totally amazing. But we are still looking for maybe 2 or 3 more countries within the next 2 years. And then we can bundle all these applications, the successful one, and say, let's go for the international application. So that's an administrative process, because UNESCO is an organ of the nation states. So it's like, a big administrative institution. And it's an interesting challenge on one hand to have the demo scene, which is completely, of course, the opposite of actually this big organization. And it's decentral, it's small, it's agile, it's anarchic, and bringing these two worlds together. That's interesting and fun.
It's amazing. So kind of the more places that accept this as a digital culture with UNESCO will then lead to international recognition. And what could that lead to? Could it be like preservation, funding, exhibitions?
Yeah, that's super important. So when we are successful, no one gets money. So that's the important part first. But of course, if now in Germany, we are starting the discussions probably at next Evoke, what people think we could do. Like, because our aim is, of course, to preserve demo scene heritage. So the museums are super interested in this and to support, because if the demo scene is, of course, on these lists, then there's a higher chance to apply for grants for your own projects, but also museums could also probably be much more easy set up if you go to a country or your region, etc., and ask, hey, I have this program, I have this plan, and for fundraising. So there were 4 reasons really to help. It's a challenge, so demo scenes like that. I mean, that was more to tackle the ego of demo sceners. Then to help demo scene organizers, party organizers, raise funds for regional funds, etc., or sponsorships maybe. The third is what you said, like this really preservation and making sure that stuff really gets preserved in museums, in exhibitions, that exhibitions are there, maybe also permanently. And where can it lead to? So demo scene things, what I said, better parties, but also maybe more workshops. Let's create workshops for getting into the scene. Let's create new competitions. Let's create a congress. Whatever people want to do, they have much more opportunity to make this more vibrant. And then last but not least, outreach to the more people. So that's why it's also so great to be on this podcast. The more people hear about it, that it's still around, and actually people are coming back or new people are joining. So really there's so many people who were in the scene or knew at least the old crack tours. And nowadays they think, oh, that's still around. Amazing. And they start doing that now.
You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see an international ambassador of the demo scene who just goes around and makes cool computer coding and kind of changes everything. That would be really fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, like growing up in the 90s and 80s, it's also to see which doors can we open then for a broader discourse. So, of course, gaming is much, much bigger. Open source is much bigger. There's so many things, so many digital cultures and communities which are there, but we have also to tweak, let's say, our communities. So, of course, we have challenges how digital works, where there, in terms of inclusion, diversity, elitism, etc., where people, I mean, we are now many of us are older, we have families, we have kids. So I really believe to get rid of this toxicity in the web, that let's say the conversation between the digital generations could be also helpful. Maybe we find different solutions, but that's a different story. But I really hope for that we can get our digital communities a little bit nicer in the future as well again.
Well, obviously, over the last year, I know a lot of the demo parties have been virtual events, streaming on YouTube and Twitch. Do you guys think the demo scene party is going to return even bigger and better after COVID, when we can all finally fly and get together again?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be such a big reunion when everyone is finally back at a party with some kind of release. And as far as I know, there's already different parties planned in different countries. So in the UK and in Germany and Hungary. And Tobias might even know some more.
Yeah, for August, it's a little bit tight because Gamescom and everything is online, and usually Evoke is right before Gamescom. So we are still in discussions. It's not yet disclosed, but we will probably do an online something this year and then come back even stronger next year. And I'm 100% sure, because with UNESCO, but also with Evoke, we have really learned. We say we are a digital culture, but in the end, we are culture, and we really crave so much to come together. Online is great and digital is great, but in the end, we need to sit together, to bond, to share, and we really, really crave it. And so I'm 100% sure it will be even bigger.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. I mean, I know friendship's always been a massive part of the scene, and the passion that you guys have still got for it is, incredible to hear. And I hope that we can make it out to a party like Evoke. Hopefully when we can travel again, we'd love to hook up and kind of see what's going on there. It all sounds really exciting. I mean, is there any kind of productions that you guys have got planned that we should look out for over the next few months?
Yeah, we're working on something. Don't really like to speak too much about it before it's done. So something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue maybe. Something worth mentioning, I think, is that Hellfire and me, we released our Haujobb Amiga demo framework some time ago, which is made for cross-development on a PC and also on a Mac. Hey, Akama, which is on GitHub. And maybe we can put the link to the website somewhere next to the podcast, and we're planning to document that even further, so it has more features already than are documented. And people expect the code to be documented, so there's a lot more stuff in it already, and we will update it in the future.
Yeah, and regarding Art of Coding, I mean, there's definitely we are waiting for feedback from France at the moment and Poland, so they are very close to the application. So if you got interested in that, there's the website demoscene, theartofcoding.net. that's the place where you also find a Discord. We have always the first Wednesday of the month is really the meetup, and where you can join and share if you're curious, if you're ex-scener or also curious to help in other ways. So that's what's happening in the next half year, getting more countries supporting the initiative. And regarding Evoke, well, news very soon. And regarding my professional work in conferences and game developer conferences, well, we are all keeping thumbs pressed for the second half of the year that the stuff is not coming back, and that we will also in the industry be able to come together physically again.
Well, guys, it's been incredible hearing some of your memories and also these, the work that you're doing in the demo scene today. I'll obviously link up everything we talked about in our show notes if people want to check out more about the art of coding. That will all be in our show notes and on our website, theretrohour.com. Tobias and Life, it's been a pleasure talking to you both. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Dan and Ravi, for having us.
Yes, it has been marvelous to share our stories, and looking forward to what's coming next. Thank you.